Okay, hello everyone. Hector Acuna here. Starting the broadcast live stream today without video. I ran into some technical problems this morning. I believe that the streaming software that I've been using might have updated, and there's some sort of disconnect to my iPhone, which is what I've been using as my webcam, and for whatever reason I'm unable to access my camera through my phone. So today's video is going to be without the video of me talking up in the corner, but it's really not the end of the world. I'm mostly talking about the work I did in Dubuque. So this video is going to be all about recapping my experience at the Plein Air festival or Plein Air event called Bluff Strokes. This is my second time participating in this event, and I put together this PDF presentation that I will share with you today. And if you have any questions or comments about the work that I'm sharing, please feel free to add those in the chat if you're here live with me today, or you can leave things down in the comments as well. I'm seeing actually a comment right in the chat right away from my friend Vicky. Hey Vicky, how's it going? I hope you're having a nice day. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat while I'm going through the presentation. So as I mentioned, this is the second time I've participated in Bluff Strokes. The first time was in 2022, and I had a really great overall experience. It was my first time really in Dubuque, and the overall response to the exhibition and to the event seemed really positive from the community. I know that a lot of the locals in Dubuque who are very supportive of the event were anticipating the year that a bunch of us were there in 2022, because they had taken a 2-year hiatus from the show. So a lot of the local art supporters were really excited for the event to come back in 2022. So because of that, it was a very unique experience, I think, just because there was a lot of hype around the show. The reception was very well supported in terms of sales and attendance. But overall, I would say this year was very similar in that regard, which I'll talk more about at the end of the presentation. So the first slide I have here is just a couple of images from the area that either I took or were shared with me while I was painting. So this first image here on the left was taken by me. This was up actually close to Montrose Terrace, which is what this sign says here in the other image. This view looking towards the Mississippi River was taken in the morning of our quick paint. I scoped out this area prior to selecting my spot for my gouache quick painting that I'll talk about later. But I looked over and I saw this glowing horizon near the Mississippi sort of industrial part of the city, and I thought it was such a beautiful atmosphere to try to remember. So I brought this in as one of my intro pictures for the presentation. And the other image here, as I was starting to say, was taken of me by a friend of mine, actually one of my hosts. The Cheevers, Doug and Jean Cheever, were my hosts for the week. I stayed with them along with a friend of mine, Todd Schabel, who's another painter and artist that was in the event this year. So the two of us got to stay at their house during the week, which was really generous of them to share their space with us. So this was a photo that Doug took of me working on one of my 3 main event paintings, and you can kind of see the building that I was painting here on the left. So remember the architecture of this building as we continue the presentation. But anyway, so I was really excited to come back to participate in the show, not having been there for a couple years. I was planning to go last year in 2023, but some sort of family events came up and I was unable to register and apply for the show. So I was really excited to come back. Here is a slide just talking a little bit about preparing my panels and my frames for the show. I've started to change my frame profile design for plein air events. If you're familiar with some of my plein air work between 2021 to 2023, most of the paintings I was making were painted on canvas wrapped panels that were either 3/4 of an inch deep or 1 inch deep. So they were pretty hefty panels. Most of them were made with 1/2 inch plywood, like birch or sandy plywood. So, you know, if it's an 18 by 18 or 20 by 20 inch painting, they get really heavy really quickly. And most of those were framed in thin float frames with some sort of hardwood like walnut or cherry. And a lot of times I would have to make the painting in the frame with tape between the painting and the frame. And recently I've decided to switch to more of the popular approach with panels and frames for these events, where you're working on a 1/4 inch panel. Maybe it's some type of hardboard or plywood that could be, you know, gessoed or primed just over the wood. These are linen panels that are handmade. They're glued, like raw pieces of linen, which I then size and prime with acrylic and eventually an oil primer. So leading up to the event this year, I had quite a few frames still from past events that I had produced, and I only had to make 3 new frames and cut maybe 4 or 5 new panels for a total of 7 framed panels for the event, which you can see here on the right image. So of those 7, these 3 were the new ones, which you could see in the the left image there that I was just presenting. And the sizes here are 18 by 18 inches, 17 by 18 inches, and 10 inches by 30 inches, which is this panel here. The other ones are 12 by 12s, 10 by 10, or 8 by 8. So most of them were square 1 by 1 ratios, which I've become very comfortable working with. I really like the symmetry and balance sort of inherent opportunities to those ratios. And I've just become really comfortable working within that sort of system. But even though I was making 3 frames, it still took probably 3 or 4 days to create these frames, and the finish on these takes the longest amount of time. And they're all hand-built, poplar frames with different, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more, some different sort of profile designs. So on the interior side of the frame, it has this cove cut that has a slightly quarter rounded concave sort of slope, and then on the outside of the frame is this little ledge sort of feature, and that's made with a second piece of wood. So the frames are really only made with 2 pieces of wood. The inside one here is the one that has that cove cut and then a rabbet cut underneath the cove, which is where the panel essentially sits into the frame. So it's been really fun to work on these different designs for the frames, even though they do take a long time. Once they're finished, it's really exciting to prepare for shows and start to wonder what the painting is going to look like in the frame. So anyway, that was some of the preparatory work leading into the event, which started at the end of September. So one of the really nice things about Bluff Strokes is that they invite artists to bring up to 4 works from home. And these can be any size up to the max event sort of panel size, which I think is 324 square inches, which it's whatever 18 by 18 would give you for square inches. And that's sort of why I maxed out some of my panel sizes for the main event part of the show. These paintings that I brought from home are all relatively small in comparison. So we're looking at a 6 by 8 painting here and here This one is a 6x9 painting, and then this is an 8x10 inch painting. And of the 4 that I brought with me, this one did find a home during the reception, which I was very pleased with and excited to see. It went to a really wonderful couple who I got to know somewhat well back in June when I was in Dubuque teaching a 4-day workshop with the Bluff Strokes organization. So the new director, Rachel, is the one who purchased the painting, which I'm really excited about. These 2 paintings here have just recently been dropped off with the Pink Llama Gallery in Cedarburg. So if you're interested in either of these paintings, feel free to reach out to the Pink Llama Gallery. This is the most recent painting of the bunch. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen this this painting, the little reel video I put together for this painting. It was a lot of fun because I worked with a very limited palette, and some of the contrasts are really subtle, and in other ways they're very extreme. So it was fun to play with that variety of contrast in that painting. This one is from 2023, and I think it's the oldest one of the bunch. It was painted in plein air like the other ones, but it was also a local kind of Grafton scene. So all of these are local spots, either in Cedarburg or in Grafton. So this is along the bike trail looking at part of Bratt Woods Nature Preserve. And then this one over here in the corner was made in downtown Cedarburg, looking between 2 of the shops right off of Washington Avenue, the main street there. So those were the 4 paintings that I brought with me. And then one of the really cool moments of my calendar this year that was really convenient was that my work had been invited into this curated exhibition at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, which, if you're not familiar with the state of Wisconsin, this is a Mississippi River city in Wisconsin on the northwest, I guess maybe more central west side of the state, in the Driftless region. And I'd been to Eau Claire once before this trip a couple of years ago, so I was really excited to come back and have a little bit more time to get to know the area and visit the art department. So the exhibition that my work was a part of that recently came down was called Evolving Sight, and it was a curated group show that was curated by one of the art faculty, Ned Gannon, Gannon, I think is his last name. And he invited work from myself, another artist named Sunny Assu, A-S-S-U, Andy Curlow, Zoe Frank, who's an artist I've admired for 10 or 12 years now. So that was a crazy thing to encounter, was finding out that we were both in the show. That was a really exciting moment. Ben Grasso is another artist that I had been familiar with since graduate school. One of my professors had kind of turned me on to his work. Kim Kiever, and then Kristen Zerngibble, I think maybe is the last name. So there were 7 of us in the show, and sort of as part of the programming for the exhibition, I was invited to come and do a public lecture on campus, and that's what this poster over on the right here was for. So in the art department building, there were a couple of these posters that I saw hanging up, and I just thought it was really funny to see this picture of myself down in my studio here in Grafton. But anyway, the lecture went pretty well. I had a lot of free reign to set that up in any sort of format that I wanted. I was given about an hour, including some time for Q&A. So this image on the left here on the bottom was taken in the lecture hall where I gave my presentation. So it was one of the big kind of lecture hall rooms on campus, which was definitely pretty intimidating. Also, I apologize about my mouse jumping around and moving my screen. But anyway, it was pretty full. I took this picture right when we got there, and we were kind of starting to set things up, and by the time I had started, more of the seats were filled, so I was pretty nervous to give this talk, but it was it was a cool opportunity, and it was a lot of fun to imagine or remember some of the moments when I was in undergrad and having visiting artists come and give talks and trying to remember or recall things that I really wanted them to talk about, or points I was hoping that they might share from their experience in the field. So that really helped me curate the presentation in a way that I hope was helpful for students. I had some really good questions. I think I had like maybe 8 or 10 questions from the group, which was really nice. Some of them were very practical, like how do you make money? Other ones were more philosophical. Some of them were very process-oriented questions. So it was nice to have a variety of questions. And then this is a picture of the group that I led the afternoon workshop, plein air painting workshop with. So after my lecture, I was asked to teach a afternoon, like maybe it was like a 2 or, well, let me think. We started at 1 and we went until about 5. So it was like a 4-hour workshop. About 3 hours was given to students just to do their own painting. And I was very impressed with the results for very little instruction or a very short introduction. A lot of these students had painting experience, and that really showed. They were very good painters and really good at composing and thinking about contrast and some of those other variables when dealing with creating images and paintings. So it was a really fun group. The 2 professors I worked with are back here in the image, Amanda and Ned. And then I think it was a range of students in terms of freshmen to seniors, which was really kind of nice to have that variety of experience as well. Let me see, was there anything else? And then this is just a quick image of the exhibition. And these were the, let me see, 6 paintings. Yeah, 6 paintings that I was invited to bring in. Technically, they were picked up right from my house from Amanda, which was really, really nice. Usually, artists have to ship work or deliver it. So it was really, really nice that she picked up my paintings and then just recently dropped them back off for me. So working with the faculty at the Eau Claire Art Department was very, very really nice and just really easy and comfortable and smooth. So that was a lot of fun. It was a really fun day overall. I mean, we started the talk at 10 o'clock and then I hung out in the afternoon, had lunch, and just prepared things for the workshop. And then after the workshop ended at 5, they gave me some time to go back to my hotel. That was the other really nice thing, is that they put me up in a hotel for both nights that I was in Eau Claire. And then they took me out and we had dinner at this really good ramen restaurant in town. So it was just a really great day, and I feel very fortunate that my work was something that they wanted to be part of the exhibition, and then they provided me with the opportunity to teach and share some of my process with students. So I started to talk a little bit about my lecture format, and basically I eventually decided to just do more of a larger arc of my career from undergrad to now, and just sort of picked some highlights of different work that I had made during those years as a student and then out of school. And so it was a pretty wide net of content. And the cool thing about curating or organizing a presentation in that way is that it started to reveal some of the larger themes within my work, whether that's in the studio or outdoors. A lot of times it doesn't feel obvious that there is this connection between content in our process, especially if we're jumping between mediums or scale or, the style of painting, subject matter. It can feel very disparate at times, and putting that talk together helped me see that, I think a lot of the work I've made since undergrad deals with the relationship of figure and ground, or the relationship between an object and its environment. I think space and the relationships of space have been really at the top of a lot of the content that I've talked about through my work over the years, and it just wasn't that obvious most of that time. So it was kind of cool to sort of be surprised by that realization. Okay, so then that was on Friday before the Bluff Strokes event started, and then Saturday, after getting breakfast with my cousin, actually both of my cousins, one of whom is in school at UW Eau Claire, the other one is in school at Stout. So the three of us got breakfast in Eau Claire on Saturday morning, which was also just a fun moment of this whole trip, and just it was kind of nice that things timed out this way. So after breakfast, I drove down to Dubuque from Eau Claire, which was a little over 3 hours, I think, and maybe 3.5 hours. Kind of got into town and started to scope out some different locations and tried to pick a couple spots that maybe would work for my main event paintings, which is something I don't typically plan for when I go to an event. Usually I'm just, arriving the day that we start our stamping, and the first day I'm usually trying to get 2 or 3 thumbnails locked in, maybe starting 1 or 2 of my paintings. But so it was unusual to arrive with so much time in advance to try to find locations for painting. So that was on Saturday, and then on Sunday, I think at probably 9 or 10 o'clock, I got to Steeple Square, which is where the exhibition happens. It's also kind of the main sort of hub for the whole event. So if you're turning things in or getting stuff stamped, registering something, you typically have to go to Steeple Square in downtown Dubuque, which is this old church. And it's a really beautiful venue, which you'll see in one of the later pictures. But I think I got everything stamped by like 10 o'clock. By 11 o'clock, I think I was out the door, maybe 10:30. And I had found this spot here off of Loris Boulevard, which is a pretty busy street that takes you from downtown Dubuque and then west up the bluff. So this is sort of like on the hill before you get to downtown. I really liked the shape of this old house and the way that the streets sort of played off of one another in terms of those angles. So I really liked that we were at the base of this road going up. This one was slightly ramped, and then the corner sort of took your eye towards the right behind the building, and then we had this slight diagonal in the foreground too. So the angles in this view is really what drew me to this location, and this is how far I got in that first session. I worked on this painting I think 3 or 4 times during the week, and it was always in the morning, and fortunately the forecast showed that it was going to be sunny every day during the event. So I was able to go into these paintings knowing that I could come back and work on them again, because the forecast showed like no clouds and just sunlight every day. So, which is also very unusual for my experiences during plein air events. This is the 18-inch by 18-inch linen panel, and you can see I was able to get quite a bit of the anatomy of the building blocked in, and starting to find some of those relative proportions between the roads and the trees and the building. It's always difficult to photograph a painting and the subject where they line up and they have similar proportions, versus how it looks when you're standing on the sidewalk, but hopefully you can gauge some of those similarities here. And because I was looking north, kind of maybe northwest just slightly, the sun was moving in this direction, and as it was moving, the shadows, like at the start of the session, like at 8 o'clock or 8:30, there would be a very large cast shadow, and that shadow would slowly move this direction and eventually disappear. But the line here from the telephone pole, the moment that I tried to capture that part of the morning, the angle of that shadow is like in this area, as you can kind of see in my painting here, which is also somewhat skewed. But again, I apologize for the low lighting in the photograph because I am in shadow. It was really hard to get good photographs at that location. And then after that painting, I found this spot over in their millwork district. It's sort of the old factory district in Dubuque, which is very close to the river. There are a lot of these really cool red brick warehouse buildings and alleyways. And if you're into painting geometry and gritty texture, this area is like a giant playground for an artist. And I painted in this area a little bit last time I was here. So I knew of this sort of district going into the event this year, and had decided pretty early on that I was going to try to find at least one or two paintings in this part of the city. And, coming in with a couple of paintings from home that were still plein air, but more playful and kind of, I don't know, maybe creative in terms of the palette I was using in some of those small paintings I brought with me to Dubuque. I wanted to approach at least one of my main event paintings with that same level of creative freedom with the palette or with the compressions and value, the level of simplifying information, and even perspective, and trying to play a little bit more with a dramatic sense of perspective of things. Not necessarily changing the relationships of perspective, but more so cropping in a way that allowed the relationship between a focal area and a peripheral area to be a bit more extreme. So, we can see there are some large blocky shapes that are meant to be more of a visual break from the focal areas. So this painting was kind of my guinea pig experimental painting. It was honestly a painting I thought that wasn't going to be well received overall in the exhibition, and actually I was wrong about that, which I'll talk about later. But anyway, this palette was mostly, I think it started as kind of a split complementary palette between like a violet and a yellow orange. Even then, it's not quite a split complement palette, but it's also not just a complementary palette. Initially, I was going to try to keep this a monochromatic palette and keep it in more of a red hue family and play with more subtle shifts in temperature to create contrast and value, but mostly temperature. So maybe a cooler red and then a warmer red. I think that was the initial idea. And then the longer I was looking at the view and then seeing this giant rectangle of alizarin, just felt a little too risky for whatever reason. I'm not sure why I felt that way, but compared to the painting I had just started in the morning over here, it just felt really different. And so I started to introduce some other colors. But as you can see, it stayed very chromatic and really extreme in terms of the saturation and that vivid palette that I ended up working on. And this is the 18 by 17 inch panel. And I forgot to photograph my sketchbook to share my thumbnails in the presentation today, which I'm a little bit annoyed with myself that I didn't do that. But you can kind of see some of those thumbnails here. And actually, this is the one that I was referencing for the painting I just talked about here. This long horizontal one, you can kind of see the corner of here was the thumbnail for the next painting that I'll talk about here in a minute. But anyway, a tool that I had with me during the event that was really important and made a big difference in the way I was painting was this piece of wood that has a level taped around it. I've talked about this a little bit online in Instagram posts, but it's still kind of a newer tool that I've been traveling with. It's mostly a straight edge tool where I can hold it up over a painting and then use it to drag my brush along to have a very straight line. But it was also helpful for finding perspective and really trying to be more sensitive to and conscious of my vanishing points and trying to be more consistent with my sense of perspective. So if my vanishing point in the painting was here, I would take my wooden tool before I blocked in all of the big shapes, like when it was still a linear type of painting. and line up one end of that piece of wood here and then the other one to like the top of this building, and just draw a straight line right on the canvas or right on the panel. So I had all of these radiating lines to these vanishing points in all of my paintings during the event, which for me was kind of a new step that honestly I really liked, because it kept me in more of a believable and convincing sense of perspective in my paintings, but it also gave me these new shapes and lines that I could maybe incorporate into the final painting. And then still on day one, which was Sunday, this is 2 weekends ago, or maybe 3 weekends ago now, that Sunday from today. But anyway, this was the third painting I started on day one of the event. And this is that 30-inch by 10-inch tall painting looking down Main Street in Dubuque. And this street runs from north to south, I believe. And I liked the slight upward hill of Main Street looking at it from the corner of First. There's a restaurant pub here on the corner called First and Main, so I was basically standing in front of their windows looking up Main Street to make this painting. And the photos of this painting in the presentation are not very good, but at some point I do plan to have better photos of them put up on my website that you can also go and check out, in the near future. But you can kind of get a sense of the composition here in the painting. Some of the cars were starting to make their appearance on the street. Here I had a very strong dramatic perspective to that receding vanishing point up the hill. And in the first session you can see I was able to block in most of the large building kind of anchor points. I had the awning from the side building up over here, some of the railings for these handrails, a couple of the cars that had been parked at times on the street. This white van is actually my van, so that one didn't move at all, which was nice. It was a fun painting to start because I was trying to keep things fairly loose between the edges, but as we'll see, it started to really tighten up in the next few sessions that I worked on it. And then in the evening on Sunday, I wanted to get out and try to find my nocturne painting subject. That way, in case I wanted to do multiple sessions, I would have plenty of time to finish the painting. A new component to the event this year compared to when I was there 2 years ago, I enjoyed the change they made for the nocturne category. So I suppose I could also explain their categories in the show. So at Bluff Strokes, they have the main event category, which you submit 3 paintings for. And they have a bunch of different categories for awards. I don't have them memorized or available at the moment, but you can find them on the website at the Bluff Strokes website. And then there's also the quick paint category, and then there's a nocturne category. So if you wanted to, you could basically just make 5 paintings and focus all of your efforts on those 5 paintings, and try to keep the quality as high as possible. That's one approach, which is kind of the approach I had in 2022. This year, as I said, I brought 7 panels with me. So I had 2 extra panels in case I finished something early, and it just gave me a little bit of flexibility for sizes depending on the subject I wanted to paint. But this is one of my 12-inch square panels that I started then on Sunday night, the first night of the event. And it took a while to find these 2 shuttle buses. I had gone downtown in Dubuque and parked in 1 or 2 spots and walked around, but ultimately kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable maybe being out there that late at night, just sort of being by myself. And I think in the future it might be nice to kind of group up with a few other artists and try to pick spots really close to each other just so you have other people around, because it is a little bit of a larger city. There's more people around at night. I ended up finding this parking lot of a school. I think it was maybe a Catholic school or some sort of religious school that had these buses parked out in the parking lot. And I liked the big shapes that they offered, and these, this really direct relationship between the parking lot light and the shadows being cast by the shuttles. So it was pretty fun to compose with the size of them in the square format here. And as you can see, this was another experiment with a limited palette, a more of a playful palette. And part of this was inspired by that kind of pink and orange painting that was purchased by Rachel in the exhibition. So that painting is titled Dreamsicle, that 8-inch by 10-inch painting. So that's how I ended day 1, Sunday. And then the next morning on day 2, I returned to my morning location. And by that point, I had chatted with my hosts, Doug and Jean, and they were asking where I found my painting locations. And then partway through working on my morning painting, I turned around and then there was Doug just kind of standing there with his camera, and he had been taking some pictures of me, which was really nice of him to do. And I didn't know that was going to be something that he was planning to do. But anyway, that was kind of a fun moment in that second session of the painting. And it's a pretty good viewpoint here that he captured, where you can see the posture that I had and the way that I was standing to be able to look at my subject and work on the painting. So one of the problems I did find painting in this location was that at a certain point the sun would come up over high enough where the light was coming down a bit more overhead, and if my panel was facing sort of the direction of the subject, or they were sort of stacked, there would be too much direct light on the panel, and it just kind of threw me off. And there were different shadows of trees and leaves sort of casting on the panel. So this became how I would stand and look at the subject to the left across the street. So then after I worked on the morning painting, I went down and continued working on my other 2 paintings. I had gone and worked on the alleyway painting a little bit more. Now actually I can't remember. I might have started this painting on day 2. So things are a little bit blurry because I worked on the same paintings multiple days. It's kind of hard to remember when they were started. Either way, at the end of day 2, I was able to progress my 3 main event paintings to this sort of level here, which I was feeling really good about. So this was on Monday at the end of the afternoon, and I felt like I was really ahead of where I was in 2022 in terms of finding my locations and developing my compositions. There were things I was really starting to appreciate about each painting, and they each felt somewhat different from one another, but they still felt very similar, which is something I go back and forth on feeling a certain way about during these events, because at the end of the week, or however long the painting time frame is, that your work is going to be put into a gallery setting and viewed as a group of paintings. And I always kind of go back and forth on whether or not I want them to feel connected or similar or different. And not that there's a right answer to that question, but knowing that that's going to be part of the experience, I think it's impossible not to think about that. And so I liked that they all had these very geometric, hard edge sort of shapes, and like that kind of language of shape in each of them. And their palettes were also very similar. There was a lot of yellow ochre and burnt sienna and cadmium orange being used in all of these paintings as well. The tricky thing that I was starting to feel by the end of Monday on the second day here was trying to make sure that I wasn't overworking my paintings. So I was putting them in their frames just to kind of look at them as finished paintings at this point, and trying to decide how I wanted to continue developing each painting. And knowing that I still had 2 or 3 more days with consistent light, I felt very comfortable at this point. And as I said, I think the biggest challenge I faced this year at the event was deciding when something was finished enough, or if it was interesting to be finished, even though it was maybe 2 or 3 days before the deadline. So this was at the end of Monday, and then on Tuesday in the morning we had our quick paint, and earlier I showed you that photograph that I took on Tuesday morning, looking next to someone's house in this neighborhood, and the light that was glowing off of the city near the Mississippi River. So that was off of this same street, a little bit farther down the road here, looking that direction. So the river is off, down the bluff, off in this direction. And I came up and parked my van on this street, which I had stopped at on my way into town to get my quick paint panel stamped. I was up a little bit earlier, and I found a spot to park and walk around, hoping to already figure out what my view and composition was going to be. That way I could just go get my panel stamped, come back, jump right into a painting, and try to make sure that I was somewhat on time and efficient with my time. So coming back, I hadn't really figured out what that view was going to be for the quick paint panel. This was my 8" by 8" panel that I made specifically for gouache or casein. So this is a paper panel, and it's made with Strathmore's River Point paper, which is basically like a Reeves BFK sort of drawing or printmaking paper. It's a fairly heavy-bodied paper that's acid-free and archival and cotton rag and all that stuff. It's a really nice surface for painting with gouache or casein. And knowing that I was going to have a fairly small panel, I didn't feel quite as stressed out as I would have if I was doing like a 12 by 12 panel, especially coming out of a process where I was allowing myself to work on paintings for multiple days at a time. Shifting gears from a very slow and methodical way of painting into a very quick and gestural way of painting was at the same time terrifying and exciting. So it was kind of nice to have this moment halfway through the week where I was reminded of, the beauty that comes out of working quickly and, living with your first mark or living with your second mark in a painting, and not reworking something. And this is where the painting ended up. So I was looking at that street view, and these cars were all parked in the morning, and some of them were getting illuminated directly by the morning light. Other ones were sitting in shadows of houses or trees that were on this side of the street. And this was with gouache that I had varnished and then waxed prior to turning it in. And this painting was purchased during the exhibition by one of the sponsors of the event. I never found out who purchased this painting. So if that person ever watches this video, please feel free to reach out and let me know that you have this painting. And it was one of my favorite paintings from the week, just kind of, as I said, I think mostly because it was a very economical type of painting in the way that one little shape could become a mirror or a wheel or a brake light or a window. I've been lately now trying to remember to allow my process to be a bit faster at times since making this painting. So that was in the morning on Tuesday, and we had to go turn the painting in right after we finished it. So I think technically we got our panel stamped between 8 and 8:30, and then they had to be turned in, I want to say, by 11 or 11:30. So we only had 2 to 3 hours to get the painting stamped, to make the painting, to frame the painting and drop it off back at Steeple Square. So fortunately, I was only 3 or 4 minutes away from Steeple Square in terms of driving time. After I turned in my painting, I chatted with a few artists for a little while, and then I was back out working on some of my larger main event paintings. So I initially went to my millwork district painting, and I didn't make any drastic changes, as you can tell. I mean, it's pretty similar to what we've already seen in the presentation. However, I did start to tighten up and sharpen some of the shapes that I had laid in earlier. The nice thing about working on a painting over multiple days is that it allows you to take the painting home and see it in different environments, and sometimes you realize that you don't like something about the painting, or that it needs a sharper edge somewhere or a softer edge somewhere else. And you can really analyze some of those abstract relationships of your painting and just ask yourself if you like the direction that it's going, which is what I found during the week working on a lot of these paintings. And one of the kind of cool, surprising things that happened this day, on day 3, was that someone had parked a very small car, a white car, on this side of the street. Oh gosh, excuse me. And I was looking at my painting and I'm like, does it need something in the bottom right corner of the composition? And I thought, I have time to paint over this if I don't like it. So I decided to put it in the painting and try to stay within the logic of the color in the painting. So I just mostly painted it with the cadmium yellow and orange combinations, and then some neutrals that I had mixed with some of the violets and purples in the painting. The only thing I don't like about the car addition was it kind of felt like maybe the car should have been a little bit larger. I think it still works, and it's interesting because of that sense of scale. It feels very small. Part of me wishes it might have come up a little bit higher in the painting, but in the end, I think it still was able to sort of hold its own in the gallery with my other paintings, and it felt finished at that point. So because the palette was so extreme and so chromatic, it took me a while to really feel comfortable with the relationships of temperature. So, one of the compliments this painting received by a couple of the artists during the show was a lot of people enjoyed the kind of lavender violet sky. I think maybe just because it's an unusual color to see in a sky for a painting. But people said, oh, it works really well, and it complements the orange, shapes in the painting. And but because of some of those key decisions for the hues, like the wall being a red wall, the sunlit area being this orangey yellow color, I was trying to figure out how cool to make some of the shapes in terms of the blues and the greens, and ultimately decided to push the information along the horizon to a fairly, what feels like a very cool bluish color, but in actuality it's more of a neutral gray, because of the context of the warmness in the other surrounding shapes. It reads as a very bluish cool color. And at one point, some of these were a very, very blue color, like even on the palette prior to painting in this shape, the color on my palette red is a very blue color. And then it just seemed, too extreme and too blue and too cool in the painting because of how warm the rest of the painting was. So this is where that painting ended up. And for the most part, I think, again, it's hard to remember looking at one photo in progress of a painting. And then this is where I started to push the afternoon painting, the 30-inch painting. By this point, I was starting to play with the level of rendering and representation in the painting. I was starting to really tighten up the left side of the painting to draw the viewer's eye to the horizon, vanishing point up the hill. I liked the interaction of some of the triangles and diagonals in the painting. And I was starting to decide how much to what point or at what level I wanted to push the finished state of representation for the parking lot area that you can kind of see up in the photo here. So ultimately I decided to just put in some of the illuminated bright shapes of cars to suggest this like row of cars parked in the parking lot. The other thing I really liked about that side of the painting was including the street highway signs or exit signs on this very distant highway over here. So those very abstract, simple shapes became one of my favorite parts of the painting, and one of my favorite moments of my work throughout the whole week, actually. And it's probably something I'll keep playing with, this yin and yang kind of extreme contrast between representation and abstraction happening within one painting. And, you know, to some extent that's been something I've explored in my work, but never to this level of description still. Like usually it's just one solid shape, kind of like that purple wall in the other painting. But here there's still moments of individual objects that are kind of being carved out of this larger atmospheric space. And I think that's why I also enjoyed this area, because there's a nice contrast between softer, more textured edges and atmospheric edges to really sharp geometric shapes. Whereas on the left side, everything is really sharp and everything is really geometric. So there's not that sense of tension happening there. And then at the end of the third day, I continued working on my nocturne painting. So I came back out to the parking lot with those two shuttle buses. Thankfully, they were still there. I was nervous that maybe they would be moved, and I would be stuck with that first sort of block-in level of the painting. But fortunately, that was not the case, and I was able to continue kind of punching up some of the color properties in the painting, sharpening some of the edges, playing more with the illusion of light, that glowing sensation around the shadow. And some of these shapes became really fun to start to design and really intentionally play with. So this is probably the painting that I experimented the most with the quality and character of my shapes and the boundaries between those shapes and the way that things interacted with one another. So you can hopefully kind of see some of the intense moments of chroma or value kind of coming and going between areas of the painting. Like around the wheel well here, I decided to really push the value to a really dark contrast to hopefully kind of keep the viewer's attention or to draw the eye over to this wheel, which was mostly a compositional choice, like in terms of where it's placed in the square. I felt like something needed to kind of sort of stand out and become a bit more of a priority in the full composition. So you can see where that's placed. It's sort of in this upper third intersection here. And then I also darkened some of the windows here. I went in and put in some more chromatic shapes in the background area as well. Like this minty green color was a newer addition. I painted in a little bit more of a magenta kind of pink in some areas. And you can see more of that street light, that cool street light temperature glowing in the background. And the last thing I think I had put in was the grouping of parking space lines here down in the foreground, which you can see. And I like that yellow-pink combination too. This painting is still available. I brought this one home. Nobody had purchased this painting during the exhibition. So if it's one you're interested in, let me know. Moving along. So another thing that was a highlight, I suppose, from the event was getting to fix one of my past paintings that I made in Dubuque. So I mentioned earlier that I was there in June to teach a 4-day workshop with the organization, and during that time I was able to meet up with one of the collectors of my work from 2022 who had purchased all 3 of my main event paintings in 2022, and one of the 3 paintings was still very wet in the brighter shapes here. And during the transport out of the gallery or the exhibition space, there was an accident where the paint got smudged up into the framing of the window in the painting. And over the last 2 years, it dried in that way, and I was able to connect with the collector and pick up the painting in June, and then deliver it during the event in September or October, and have it all fixed up and ready for the collector. So that was a really important moment for me. This is something that fortunately hasn't happened very often during the plein air events, but because you're making the painting and then immediately exhibiting the painting, the opportunity for a painting to be smudged or damaged while it's still wet is really, really likely still. And I had known that this was smudged for that whole 2-year break, and I was just really sad internally, knowing that it wasn't in the condition that I had created or left it in, and that was really hard to just not feel bummed about. So knowing that it's fixed and that everything is how it's supposed to be again was really a good feeling. The weird thing about that experience in fixing this, though, was I was looking at a photograph I took of the painting before it was in the exhibition, before I hung it up and submitted the painting. So I had a really good photo of this painting, and it was kind of fun to look at that photo as a reference to fix those areas, which is something I've never had to do before. So that was kind of bizarre. It was like a very meta way of painting. And then that brings us into day 4. So at this point now, this is, I want to say, Thursday morning. So because Wednesday, the day before, was the quick paint morning, I wasn't able to work on this building painting on Loris Boulevard. And there were some things that I felt were still not quite resolved. So I brought it back out on Thursday and worked on the painting. The photograph here on the left of my car tire with this little toy car under it was a sort of a moment to remember that there was this weird water plumbing draining city event that happened while I was working on the painting. And I have a video, but I didn't bring it into the slideshow, of this stream, this 8-inch deep stream of city water running down Loris Boulevard. And it had carried all this debris from the street into everyone's cars that were parked there. And under my wheel was this little toy car that I thought was just really interesting and bizarre. So I brought that in just to share with you. Anyhow, this is where this painting ended up. And let me zoom in so you can get a better look at the color and the shapes. And unfortunately, the way this painting looked in the exhibition was a little bit of a bummer, just because the light that was over my wall was very warm. It was a very orange, yellowy type of temperature. And because of that, it kind of neutralized a lot of the subtlety of temperature in the painting between warm and cool colors. As we can see, this painting or this photo was taken, I think, in the shade of a very sunny day. So the light on it is fairly neutral. And we can see a lot of the richness in chroma and in temperature, especially in the streets, this subtle shifting of green to yellow to gray to lavender to purple in these different shapes is really best seen in more of a neutral or daylight type of environment. So you'll see in the later images from the show how different some of those interactions look. But anyhow, I was pretty happy with the way the painting turned out. There are definitely some things that if I had more time, I might keep building up the layers. But again, I think it's easy in the context of a plein air show to feel like freshness is the goal, and economy is really what we should be striving for in our shapes and in our marks. And I agree with that to some extent, but some of my favorite painters are people that work on paintings for months or years and just build this rich history in the object of the painting. And more and more do I feel myself leaning towards that desire to create a painting that feels like it has a lot of time embedded into the layers. And that only comes after layering and layering, shapes and shapes into your painting. So there are moments I really loved in the painting and moments that I really don't love. But looking at this photograph here, I feel like this whole section I'm pretty happy with the way that some of the temperatures are reading, and the subtle texture shifts of impasto to more transparent passages of paint were really fun to see at this final session. And it took a while to get to that point where, because some areas are very opaque, like this orange color on the wall, it allows areas like this to feel more atmospheric and more open in terms of depth, or like this feeling of depth between the shapes and between the layers of color. So that really didn't start to click or register until the end of this third and final session on the painting. And I ended up titling this painting, sorry, my cursor is jumping around here. I ended up titling the painting I Look Taller on Loris Boulevard, or I Look Tall on Loris Boulevard. And the reason I gave it that title was because on the first day that I was working on the painting, as I was blocking in the large shapes, there were these two young girls that lived in this neighborhood on their bikes who came over and were sort of curious about what I was doing, and I told them that I was painting, and it was such an early part of the process that I don't think they could connect what it was I was looking at. So they were like, "What are you painting?" And so then I sort of pointed to the house, and they said, "Oh, it looks nice," and they kind of biked away. And then 20 or 30 minutes later, they returned on their bikes again, and one of them had said something like, you're really tall. And I thought, really? Like, I kind of was like, "Oh, you think I'm tall?" And they said, "Yeah, you're really tall." And I said, I don't usually feel like a very tall person. And I just thought it was such a funny thing that they said. And then they kind of biked away again. And so it was fun to take a moment that had really nothing to do with the painting itself, and let that inspire the title of the painting, which doesn't always happen. It's hard to always paint in a location where people are going to come up and talk to you. And even, I think it's one of those things where if you're looking for it, it's never going to happen. And when you're not thinking about it, it happens. These sort of conversations and interactions that are really memorable and just really strange, yet important at the same time. So anyway, that's what inspired the title of this painting. Moving along, this is how that afternoon, like lunchtime painting turned out, kind of my midday painting, which basically it's the same painting that we saw earlier, but now it's in the frame. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see the full painting with the frame here. I like the way this one looked in the frame. Some of the paintings, I don't know if the kind of goldish hue of the metal leafing complemented or worked together. This one I thought was okay. Maybe part of it's this like purpley hue in the painting. But other ones I feel like it kind of gets in the way of the painting a little bit. And the frames, that's made with an aluminum leaf, like a hand glued leaf aluminum, and then it's buffed and sanded to weather and kind of antique the aluminum, and then I've been going over that with an oil paint and tinting the leaf. Some of the frames I've used raw umber so far, which I kind of like because it's a pretty neutral hue compared to something like this. These ones I used a transparent earth orange, I think was the full pigment title. I think it's from Gamblin, and I don't typically use a lot of those earth transparent pigments on my palette, but I had a couple of those tubes lying around and I wanted to see how they would look. And I'd never tried a more gold type of finish on the metal leafing so far, so that's what I tried out. And again, looking back now, I kind of wish I would have just done the raw umber on these, just to keep some of the attention off the frame and instead on the painting. And then this is where the horizontal painting ended up. So Again, it's pretty similar to what we just saw the last time I showed this painting. But I'll zoom in here so we can get a better look at some of the details. It is a fairly detailed rendered painting compared to most of my other plein air work as of late. Let me see if I can just use my arrows here. Every time I use my mouse, it seems to jump. So this is the kind of main focal area of the painting. You can tell there's a lot of small details and pieces of information leading the eye up the hill. It took a while to get to this point of shape relationships and deciding to essentially block out the street wherever there isn't a car. For a while, I had these areas sort of in flux, like it wasn't painted as the street, and it also wasn't fully painted as a car. Even though cars were constantly coming and going on this street while I was working on the painting, it was definitely a challenge to direct where to place a car. Most of that last session on this painting was spent playing with some of the subtle contrasts in the reflection of this window, tightening up some of the smaller shapes here, adding in these signs from farther away businesses along that horizon line, putting in some of the direct light on the building here, really trying to add a bit more variety in this grouping of buildings and businesses over on the right side. And part of me regrets putting that much detail into this painting. I think it kind of maybe overcooked or overbaked the painting. If you're a painter, I think you'll know what I mean by that. But knowing when to quit is one of the hardest parts when you have this much time of consistent light on your side. So it's a blessing and a curse, I think, in some ways. And that's one of those things that if I'm ever faced with a similar situation or opportunity to work on a painting 4 times in the same week, to try to find a way to give myself some space to be more loose and experimental still. And this is kind of what became that moment for me in this painting. But no matter how simple and loose and abstract this area is, the other side of the painting is still going to look very finished and rendered and complete and clear. So that's just the reality of this painting now. And this painting is also available still. This one was not purchased during the exhibition. So if you're watching this at some point and you're interested in inquiring about the painting, please send me an email or a message, and we can figure out if it's available. A quick story I have about this particular car that I was debating sharing or not, but it was something that really stood out the whole week during my experience. This car was part of the painting from that first session, and I had this very strange interaction with a local woman who was the owner of the vehicle. I was about an hour or 2 into the process of the painting on the first day on Sunday, and this car drove by very slowly, and the driver, who was probably in her mid-30s or late 30s maybe, so pretty close in age to me, drove by kind of looking out her window and went around the corner, and then a few minutes passed and she was back again and kind of came up the hill, turned around and parked right here, and which isn't unusual. That happens sometimes when you're painting in plein air. The people are very curious and they kind of come and check out what you're doing. So she parked her car, got out of the car, walked over directly up to me and looked at my painting, and she's like, "Oh, you're painting?" And she's like, "Wow, it looks really nice." And I said, "Thanks." I'm like, "Yeah, there's this event going on called Bluff Strokes," and basically gave her a quick 2-minute spiel about the plein air event, and she's like, "Cool." And then she went inside, had her lunch for 40 minutes or so, came back out, and again kind of walked right up to me and just sort of confirmed. She said, "Oh, so this is going to be in that competition that you were talking about?" And I said, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, if you're around on Friday or Saturday, you should definitely come and see our show." And she said, she kind of paused and said something like, well, if I'm still alive, I'll try to come. And she said it so nonchalantly and passively that I kind of wasn't sure I heard word for word what she said. And then I kind of was like, oh, is everything okay? And she was like, no. And I thought, or I kind of told her like, well, is there someone that we can call or like for help? And she said, no, it's not really that kind of a problem. It's more of a spiritual problem. And I've never had this type of conversation or interaction with someone before. And it just really kind of put me on edge a little bit. I just felt like, wow, this is really strange how transparent or vulnerable or, open this person is with me, who I just met. I don't really know this person. And she was by herself. And immediately I started to think, she's not entirely specific about what she's talking about, but it almost sounds like this could be something related to, the end of your life and, maybe wanting to be part of, ending your life or something. And, I don't want to get too dark in my presentation, but that's where my imagination started to drift towards, thinking that might be what she's talking about. And so I started to say, well, you should definitely come to our show if you have time. And on Saturday we have this urban sketching free program for anyone to come and draw with artists. And I asked if she liked to draw, and she said when she was younger she did. And I said, well, here's a handout that I had handy from a workshop that I taught, and gave that to her and said, if you decide to come to this sketching outing, this information might be kind of helpful or useful. And she said, thanks, and kind of went in her car. And then she sat in her car for 45 minutes to an hour. And during that time, I was starting to kind of, obsess over what she had said, and ended up calling Megan, my wife, and kind of explaining the situation around the corner away from where I was painting. And, Megan kind of advised me based on training she's had with high school, students, and looking for signs of that sort of situation and things that they, professionals have trained, educators to be aware of and to feel comfortable doing. And one of those strategies is to ask the person outright, like if that's something that they're considering. And immediately just my heart started racing, and I'm like, I don't know, that feels, kind of uncomfortable, and I don't want to make anything worse, or I don't want to make someone else uncomfortable. And, eventually Megan sort of helped me find that confidence to feel comfortable to go and ask this woman that question. And after I hung up with Megan about 10 or 15 minutes later, I talked myself up to go and do that, and kind of within a few minutes had asked her that question, and she said, no, that's not at all what I was talking about. And I said, oh, okay, good. I'm relieved, and I'm happy to hear that. And, I'm sorry for bothering you. And she said, oh, it's fine. And then I kind of walked away, and then she eventually had drove off, and that was the last I had heard from her or seen her in town. And it was just one of those moments that you don't expect, obviously, but you also forget that, when you're painting in a public space, like there are people from all walks of life and backgrounds and, levels of power and influence and history and culture that you may interact with, and your path might overlap with. And it was just one of those things, I think, that really took me out of my painting headspace. And it'll be something that will stay with me the whole time every time I look at this painting. I think that memory will come back to me. And it's one of those things at an event that nobody really prepares for or expects to happen, or a conversation that they feel like should be talked about or trained with artists. And it's one of those things, I think every artist has their own strategy and philosophy on those types of conversations with strangers, essentially. And I share that story just to kind of provide an example for anyone who might be in a similar type of conversation at some point as a plein air painter. And I think it's an interesting question to kind of pose to the community and talk about, like, because we're in a public space and there are so many people that we interact with, and what are some of the things that we want to uphold, or as an artist or just a member of society, right? Because this is a very public way of making art, and it's a very exposed way of making art. We have very little control over who comes up to us and what is shared with us, and those moments of really heavy conversation are really challenging to navigate. And anyhow, that's something that happened during the event that was new for me, and I hope is a very rare occurrence in my plein air future as well. But anyway, I thought I would share that because it was a very significant moment from the week. So that was the afternoon on Wednesday, day 4, and one of the cool things to shift gears here into more of a happy kind of subject here. One of the really cool things that got to happen during the event was this collaborative programming between the Bluff Strokes organization and a local kind of youth arts group. I say youth, but I don't think they really are exclusive to any age group. It just seems that they happen to mostly be made up of artists who are in their 20s, 30s, and maybe early 40s, based on what I've been told. And anyhow, that group, I'm forgetting the name of the group now, which I regret, but was invited to come and meet and mingle with a few of the plein air painters in the Bluff Strokes event, who were invited to come and share our experiences and just kind of open up our schedule to be a resource for anyone who might be interested in what plein air painting is and what painting in these types of events looks like and feels like, what are the pros and cons, those types of questions. And it's really cool that that's part of the Bluff Strokes, calendar and schedule, that they are looking for opportunities to take their plein air event and have it be a resource for artists of all different types of backgrounds and levels of experience. So I think there were maybe 7 of us who were invited to come and share our time, which I thought was really nice and really fun. And then later on in the event, so this image is from that sort of meet and greet roundtable Wednesday evening experience. I just took a quick photo towards the end of the night. The cool thing is that all of us were split into pairs, and so maybe there were 8 of us, and we moved between each of the 4 tables for 20 minutes at a time or so, maybe 10 to 20 minutes at a time, and everyone sitting at that table could ask us any question that they wanted to ask us. And it was a good conversation throughout the whole evening, and it's fun to meet other artists who like to paint and draw and have a curiosity for the benefits of plein air. Some of the organizers for events seem to realize that the majority of artists who participate in the events are an older demographic of artists, and I think part of that is just there's more of a flexible schedule to travel and do these events that are a week, sometimes 2 weeks at a time. And if you have a part-time job or a full-time job, it's really hard to take that time off. And it's really hard, I think, to get to a level where you're able to do it professionally or semi-professionally, where you're experienced enough, you're skilled enough, you're well-practiced enough to do multiple events a year and have the payoff be worth your time and worth that investment up front, because traveling costs money, applying to the shows costs money, acquiring the materials costs money, and there's food and other costs as well. So to do that professionally, I think you have to find that kind of balance between all of those variables, and if your schedule isn't a flexible component, then it's really difficult to do it, I think, professionally. So, but having that said, I think organizers of events are looking for ways to sort of broaden the demographics and, share that these opportunities are open for almost anybody and everybody to apply themselves into these opportunities. That doesn't guarantee that you'll get to do them, but that the application pool is typically pretty public and pretty open. So this is a really great example of where an organization of a plein air event is doing something about that, not problem, because I don't know if it's necessarily a problem, but that opportunity, right? They're creating those opportunities to bridge those demographic gaps. But anyhow, I was starting to say there was a sketchbook page that I took a quick picture of by one of the artists that was in the group that night. And while we were walking around and chatting with them, excuse me, I have to stretch for a second here. While we were meeting with them, she was doing a couple of these quick little portrait kind of caricature cartoon portraits of us, some of us, and she shared the page with me because I was one of the artists that she drew, so I thought I would share that in my presentation too. So that was really nice and sweet of her to share that with me. And then that brings us to the final full day of painting that we had in the week. So this is the 5th day of the week. This is Thursday. And Thursday morning, we had to turn in our nocturne painting. So my shuttle bus painting was turned in. And then I felt pretty good about my other, my main event paintings. And I thought, I don't want to overwork them. They feel like they're done. I don't think it's worth driving to those locations to paint for 20 minutes and make a couple of slight adjustments. I'll just call them done. So that freed up my whole afternoon to kind of, title and wrap up paintings. And I still had a 12 by 12, well, technically, I had a 10 by 10 and a 12 by 12 linen panel. And I drove out to an area that I had remembered liking a lot when I was in the event in 2022. So this is a farmland area off of the main highways that take you west away from Dubuque, up the bluffs. And I painted in this area for one of my main event paintings in 2022. And there were a couple of residential streets I remember that were very open and very quiet, with these nice vista sort of landscape rolling hill views. And I had knocked out this 12 by 12 inch, very simple composition, all in that one kind of midday afternoon session. So this is where the painting ended up. Let me show you the whole thing here. What I liked about the painting is that it has these pretty organic edges between a lot of the main shapes. There's a nice atmospheric kind of noise between some of those shapes in the painting. And the palette was also very simple, which allowed the shapes, I think, to carry a lot of the interest and hold a lot of the interest in the painting. So compositionally, it was a really fun painting to make. I do kind of wish I had a little bit more time to build up more of an impasto variety of paint consistency on the surface. But for one session, I was pretty happy with the level of detail and accuracy, and trying to convey that sense of atmosphere and depth was a fun challenge for this painting. And I think there's something to be said about a painting that is mostly made up of a few simple shapes to hold it together. So in that regard, it was one of my favorite paintings that week. And then in the afternoon into the evening, I went back to my host's house, and Doug brought his camera back out again and took a couple pictures of me working on titling things and looking at them as a group. I was taking some photographs of the paintings. I have this little command hook strip attached to one of my van doors, and it works really well as a clip to hang and then photograph my paintings. You can kind of see a little bit of the mess that my van allows me to have on these trips. Megan and I built these wooden cot kind of beds in 2021, and they've come in handy for these trips where I want to keep my paintings, sitting flat on top of the beds, and there's plenty of storage space for materials and easels and that stuff underneath the beds. But that gives you a kind of an idea of the layout of my vehicle during the week. And yeah, it was nice to be able to see them side by side like this and just start to compare things I liked about them and things I didn't really love about them, which is typically the case. That happens a lot during these events. But overall, I think what was really lovely about my experience in Dubuque this year was getting to know Gene and Doug, and having the opportunity to meet them and stay with them for the week was really really special, and made for a really enjoyable experience. So it's cool on top of that to have some of these photos of the process that Doug shared with me as well. And then that brings us to well, let me see. I'm trying to I feel like my days are all mixed up now. This must have been, yeah. Okay, so this was Thursday into Thursday evening. Got all of my paintings titled. I signed all of my certificates of authenticity that I attached to the back of them. Each of those is embossed with a little hand embosser, custom embosser that I have. And they're all kind of wrapped and squared away for drop-off on Friday morning. Which brings me to one of my last slides here for Bluff Strokes. And if you have the time, please stick around. I have an announcement that I want to share at the end of the presentation. So we're getting to the end, but this is how the wall looked in the gallery. I have a picture that my friend Jimmy Navarro, who's in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa painter. He and his partner Katie are two of the funniest and cool artists that I've met through these plein air events, and anytime we're in an exhibition or event together, it's really, really fun. And I'm usually left with like a very sore core just because I've been laughing so hard chatting with them. But he was really nice to be like, hey, stand by your wall, let me take a picture of you. And then he just sent me a bunch of these really nice pictures. But it's nice because you can get a sense of the scale of the paintings this way. So which was something that was one of my goals for the event. I really wanted to push the scale of the work. I wanted to try to challenge myself to try to make 3 paintings that were hopefully, well composed, had a good sense of paint handling, and a lot of visual interest for things like shape and line and value relationships and color properties and all that good stuff. And for the most part, I'm pretty happy. I feel like the goal was met. And on top of that, I think there were some experiments that were worth taking those chances. And let me just zoom in again real quick just to give you a quick look. So earlier I talked about how warm the light was, and I'm hoping you can really notice what I'm talking about here. And if you're willing to allow me to just scroll really quickly here, if I jump back to the painting here and then we scroll back down, it's more noticeable, that temperature shift that I was talking about. And overall, it wasn't a big deal, and I try really hard not to, complain or point out some of those things. And it's never really ever been a noticeable thing until I saw this painting, on Saturday morning or Friday night, and I was like, wow, it looks so different right now than it did when I was working on it. And I think because there's so much yellow and warm color in some of these larger passages of the painting, it, like I said, it kind of leveled out a lot of those nuances of muted tones. But anyhow, you can take that however you want. One thing that was really nice about the event this year is that they invited us to bring our own little kind of bio, artist statement, CV printout that we could type up ourselves and print out and bring. So this is my little bio that I brought with me. Actually, kind of a fun fact. This little photo of me was taken in Door County in 2022. It's really blurry, so I'm not going to zoom in anymore. But the person who photographed this image of me was also Jimmy Navarro. So the same guy that took this photo, has helped me out twice during these events. And so if you ever meet Jimmy Navarro, you should definitely thank him for me for being such a great event, sort of like headshot photographer person. So also while we're talking about Jimmy and Katie, you should definitely look up their work. It's Katie Jensen and Jimmy Navarro, Navarro. And yeah, check out their work. And then Friday night was the reception for the show. This is kind of like the ticketed big gala kind of event. And one of the other things that's interesting about Bluff Strokes and the way that they structure their exhibition is to attend on Friday evening, you have to buy a ticket that is, I think, $150, which, that sounds pretty steep. And I mean, it is somewhat expensive up front. However, $100 of your ticket investment goes towards purchasing a painting. So now you have a painting that you can purchase that's automatically $100 cheaper because you bought a ticket for Friday night. And I thought that's such a great idea to bring people into the show, to create some, kind of like opportunities for sales, to kind of prime some of those sales, which I've only been to a handful of plein air events that have this sort of large, big, not exclusive, but sort of ticketed entry. And I thought that that $100 kind of like pre-sale component was really smart. But anyway, so this was the Friday night kind of evening party reception night. And I will share that this painting was recognized with one of the awards during the ceremony. The event judge, Deborah Joy Grosser, I think is how you pronounce her last name, who's, I want to say she's from Nebraska or one of the Dakotas. I think it's Nebraska, but I hope it's one of those ones. And I've met her a handful of times during the Door County plein air event, but she was unable to make it this last year, so it's been over a year since I've seen her. But she gave this painting the first place award for the Historic Dubuque category, which was really nice that this painting was recognized. And this was the painting that sold of the 3 main event ones. So both of these are available if you're interested. Depending on when you're watching this video, they might not be available anymore. But you can always reach out to me and we can figure that out. So moving on, Saturday night was a lot of fun. The food that was catered in was really, really good. And just the environment overall was a lot of fun. Everybody's dressed up and excited to look at our paintings and talk about our paintings, and you feel like it's nice to be able to come out of a week of painting and jump right into this like exciting night of conversation. So then Saturday morning, the exhibition is open to the public and there's no ticketed entry. Anyone can come in and see the remaining paintings that are for sale. Most of the paintings that sold on Friday are taken Friday evening. So that's also an incentive for people to attend on Friday night. That way you're seeing every painting that was submitted for the show. While artists are... while the show opens on Saturday morning, artists are encouraged and invited to go paint in town during the very well-known, popular farmers market that's like half a mile long, farmers market or something like that. I've never actually walked the whole thing, so I'm not sure how big it is, but it sounds, and from the periphery, it feels like it's that big of a farmers market. And this year, I decided to paint one of the kind of popular main murals in town. there's a group in Dubuque called Voices Art Center. And for years, maybe 10 to 15 years now, they've been doing these public mural projects where they get funding to bring in artists, sometimes from out of state, to come and do these really high quality murals. This mural apparently was made by a Dubuque local. I don't think he lives in the city anymore from what people told me, but this was my Saturday morning painting that I created, and you can just see when it's in direct sunlight versus the shade how different the temperature feels again. But I wanted to show you how it looked in the finished frame. This painting is also still available for purchase if anyone is interested. This is a oil painting that's 10 inches by 10 inches on a handmade linen panel again. And I think because I knew it was just going to be a few hour long painting, it was kind of nice to lean into that more loose, gestural, kind of abstract way of painting in some ways, with some of my edges and moments of simplification in that painting. So that brings us to the end of the Bluff Strokes event and the paintings that were created during the event. As I said, there was an announcement that I wanted to share with you, and I'm hoping that this will work. So this slide here is a video, and I'm going to make sure that this will play. So as you can read, there is a announcement for a new giclée print, and if you're familiar with my plein air work, you might recognize the painting that is going to be in this video. I'm hoping that the audio is coming through, so I'm going to stop talking here.
Limited edition set of 10 giclée museum quality prints of a painting I made earlier this summer in Traverse City during the Paint Grand Traverse event. The painting is titled "The Bagaris Wave Wall Keeps Dancing Sunlight and First Kisses," and it was a really great experience getting to make this painting across multiple afternoons. The title comes from a story that was shared with me by a local who had his first kiss as a young kid sitting on this cinder block wall that has since been painted in recent years. So that was part of the inspiration for the title of the painting. And I've been thinking about this for a while and decided to create a very small run of prints. And these are available right now on my website in my print shop at acunaarts.com. So you can order the print by itself and it will ship in a plastic sleeve. Or for a little bit more, you can have your print already framed. And there's two framing options. I have black frames with glass or white frames with glass. There's only a few of the white frames, so make sure to order those as soon as possible if you're interested in a white frame. These prints are 12 inches square. The actual image is 10 inches square, so just to give you a sense of the scale. If you're interested, check out my website and order a print. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay, thank you, Vicky, for letting me know that the audio is working. That's really nice. Let's go back to the presentation real quick. I have a few other slides I wanted to just sort of talk about and share. So the announcement, as you just saw, is for this new giclée museum archival quality print. Let me just slide our presentation up so you can see this slide a little bit better. So the prints are 12 inches by 12 inches. That's the size of the paper. The image is 10 inches by 10 inches. And I had these printed a few weeks ago, and I've been holding on to them until after some of my recent events. I wanted to make sure that I announced everything when everything was really set and ready to go. So these are currently live and available for purchase. As you saw in the announcement, there are only 10 prints. So it's a very limited edition. I don't typically do a lot of print releases, mostly because I struggle to decide which paintings I think would make for good prints. And this is a painting that definitely has a lot of meaning for me. When I look at the painting, there's a whole story that goes with this painting that You will be able to read more in depth if you check out the listing on my website or visit my Instagram. I think the YouTube sort of description for that commercial essentially that I just presented also describes the painting's history and story a little bit more. But just for right now, what I will share is that the painting was made in Traverse City. It's a 24-inch by 24-inch painting. It's one of the largest plein air paintings that I made in 2024. And it was a 3 or 4 session afternoon painting in the one of the historic neighborhoods of Traverse City. And this was back in June when I participated in the event. The painting was pretty well received during the show in Traverse City. It was recognized with one of the 3 merit awards, which I was told kind of is the same as a second place award in the order that the awards were given, but technically the ribbon says merit award. And anyhow, it was one of my favorite paintings that I created this year. I just saw in the chat that Vicky is purchasing one, so thank you, Vicky. That's super nice of you to do that, and I can't wait for you to get the print. The quality of the prints are super, super high. The company in Madison called Picture Salon is a really good company. I've ordered a few prints with them in the past. It's been a few years now, but these are definitely on par with the quality that I've always seen from their company. So Vicky's going to get print 1 of 10, which is really cool. And it's going to be framed with one of the white frames. So they're available framed or unframed as the video showed. And before I wrap up the live stream, I did want to just take us to my website, which is akunaarts.com. And I have a few different tabs on my website, but to get to the print page in my shop, if you click on the shop tab and scroll down, there is a print section here. And in the print section, you should be able to find the Bagaris Wave Wall Keeps Dancing Sunlight and First Kisses print right at the top. And then if you scroll down, you should be able to purchase it either framed or unframed. So the $60 price is the unframed price. If you want to add a frame, it goes to $85. So something I do want to mention is that I offer free shipping on orders of $100 or more if you live in the U.S. So if you're in the 48 continental states and you want to get one of the framed prints, I would highly recommend that you check out other objects and products or things that you can buy. It's weird to say products, but they are products in my online shop that could bring you to that $100 mark. If you would rather not pay for shipping and have something else in your cart instead. So check out what else is in my print shop. And I think that now brings us to pretty much the end of the stream. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. It's super fun to be able to consolidate these experiences at these plein air events into this format. I'm hoping to do more live streams this winter since I'll be more homebound for the next couple months after my final workshop that I'm going to be teaching in Tennessee that's coming up in a few weeks in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. That's my last sort of big event for the year, and then I'm going to be home through next spring. I did want to share one last little detailed story about this painting before I let you go. So one of the reasons why this painting is so special to me is because during the making of the painting, I met a few local residents in that neighborhood, and one of them was this gentleman named Matt, and he approached me. This story is also in the listing here if you forget about this or if you want to read more about it. But what I'll say is that he was sharing some stories about growing up in this neighborhood, and right behind where I was standing when I made the painting were a bunch of other houses, and the house right behind me is the house where he was like born and raised, maybe 50 or 60 years ago, somewhere in that range, based on what he told me. And so he had all these stories about biking in the alleyway, and he was wearing this like Thrasher style Traverse City t-shirt and like a trucker hat, and he was riding this like vintage road bike that was almost completely covered in stickers, which I thought was really cool. But while we were chatting, he pointed to the wall, because I had told him that, you know, part of the reason I wanted to paint this view was because I liked the shape and the pattern of the wall, the mural on this wall in the yard. And he was like, yeah, actually, there's kind of a funny story. When I was like 10 or 11, I had my first kiss sitting on that wall. And it was one of those moments when you're working on a painting outdoors in public where you stop and realize, like, you're not just painting a lawn or trees or a building or a road or just a wall. Like, you're painting someone else's like stage set for their life, you know, and you're painting their home, and you're painting this place that contains years and years and years of personal memories and meaningful moments that to someone else is just another tree trunk, or it's just another cinder block wall. But the way that he said that one little story struck this nerve with me that I've been thinking about ever since. And that's the main reason why this painting was selected for this print release. And I hope it's a story that resonates with other people as well, and that hopefully gives you some context for the title of the painting. And for me, it was such a special moment and component to the process of making this painting. So I just wanted to share that with you during the live stream. And feel free to read more about the print and the painting on my website if you're interested, which again is acunaarts.com. That's my last name, and then ARTS altogether.com. So that brings us to the end. Thank you again to everyone who tuned in live. It's really nice to see a familiar face and name in the chat. So thank you so much, Vicky, for tuning in and for interacting in the chat, and for buying the first print. That's so exciting. And to everyone else who also tuned in, thank you so much. If you're watching this after the recording, I really appreciate it. As I mentioned, I'm hoping to do more live streams in the coming months. I'm also hoping that I can resolve whatever's going on with my phone camera connection. I think that might take a week or two to kind of figure out. So if anyone has experience with OBS, the streaming app, feel free to share that with me if you have any tips, because it never was a problem until today. I haven't live streamed in over a month, so I'm assuming there was some sort of update that happened that has lost the capability and compatibility with my phone. So anyhow, that's all I have for you today. Thank you again for watching. Take care, everyone, and I will see you sometime soon, I hope. So thanks again. Take care.